It's not every day we get to analyze a leader's self-assessment, right?
Mm.
Like right as they're leaving office.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we're doing today, you and me. We're diving deep into Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's final address,
Right.
um, given just yesterday, September 30th, 2024.
Hmm.
The title, Despedida,
Farewell.
Farewell to You and Me.
And what a farewell it was. I mean, this is a pivotal moment, right? Because it not only signals the end of AMLO's time leading the leftist Morena Party,
Right.
but it also sets the stage for Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo's historic term as Mexico's first female president.
Yeah.
Talk about pressure.
No kidding. So AMLO, in his own words, how did he do? I mean, let's just say the man doesn't shy away from using the word record, right?
Yeah.
It feels like we're looking at like a list of top-selling albums here.
Right.
Not a political speech.
He certainly emphasizes what he sees as his administration's achievements.
Okay.
Poverty and inequality reduction are clearly points of pride for him, with AMLO claiming millions lifted out of poverty during his time in office. And this ties directly into his fourth transformation rhetoric.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah.
Fourth transformation, for those of us who didn't get the memo, what's the significance of that phrase?
Essentially, AMLO positions his administration as like the next great era in Mexican history.
Okay.
A radical shift from what he calls the neoliberal period that preceded him.
Right.
Think of it as a complete overhaul of kind of governance and social structures.
Yeah.
It's powerful rhetoric. It frames his presidency as a turning point.
A turning point with, of course, a heavy emphasis on those positive statistics that he's throwing out there. He mentions a significant drop in the poverty rate, the implementation of like large-scale social programs, but as always, context is key.
Yeah.
What's the bigger economic picture here?
You're spot on. While AMLO celebrates record formal employment figures, Mexico's overall economic growth has been moderate,
Okay.
impacted by global slowdowns, among other factors.
Right.
So while there are positive indicators, the complete economic picture is more complex.
And speaking of a more complex picture, something that caught my eye was AMLO's focus on the Mexican peso's strength. He even seems to take a little jab at previous administrations while praising its stability compared to, quote, historical devaluations. Not the most unifying move in a farewell speech, is it?
It's a pattern we see throughout the address. AMLO frequently contrasts his approach with his predecessors, particularly on economic policy.
Okay.
Take his emphasis on austerity measures, for example. He paints a picture of a leaner, more efficient government under his leadership.
And he doesn't just stop at painting a picture. He busts out the easel and goes for like a full-blown masterpiece.
Right.
I mean, comparing his approach to austerity to St. Francis of Assisi, that's some next-level legacy crafting right there. What's going on with that comparison?
It's certainly a bold choice, and it really speaks to his desire to be remembered for simplicity and a rejection of lavish spending.
Okay.
He links this frugality to funding those social programs,
Right.
essentially arguing that by saving money, his administration was able to invest more in the people.
So less for fancy dinners, more for tortillas, right?
Okay.
Speaking of which, he mentions the rising purchasing power of the minimum wage, even using the example of how many tortillas someone can buy.
Right.
What does that actually mean for, everyday Mexicans?
The tortilla example is more than just a folksy anecdote. It highlights a tangible impact on basic necessities.
Right.
Rising purchasing power, even for everyday items like that, can make a significant difference in people's lives, especially those struggling to make ends meet. It's a way for AMLO to connect his economic policies to the daily realities of Mexican citizens.
And speaking of connection, he's certainly keen to highlight the public's trust, even presenting data that suggests high approval ratings. Is that data reliable, though?
That's a good question.
I mean, his approval ratings have been known to fluctuate, right?
Yeah.
How does this rosy picture square with the reality of public opinion throughout his term?
That, my friend, is a question worth pondering. And it leads us to another critical aspect of AMLO's address, his security track record. He dedicates a significant portion of the speech to praising his security initiatives and claiming victory over crime.
From tortillas to tackling crime. Quite the range.
Yeah.
What specifically does he highlight as his big security wins?
He starts by emphasizing a significant reduction in huachico. That's fuel theft, which was rampant before he took office. AMLO claims cracking down on this illicit industry saved the government billions.
Billions would it be? Okay. Now that's a number that deserves a second look. He also mentioned a decrease in kidnapping rates,
Yeah.
especially among wealthier Mexicans. That struck me as particularly interesting. What's the significance of that detail?
It's a fascinating point, and one that raises more questions than answers.
Okay.
Did this decline result from specific government policies, broader socioeconomic factors, a combination?
Right.
It's an area where further investigation beyond AMLO's self-reported successes is warranted.
So maybe a bit of a victory lap, but with some unexplored terrain underneath. Speaking of unexplored terrain, let's talk about his pride and joy, the National Guard. He touts its creation as a major achievement in his fight against crime.
Right.
However, wasn't there significant controversy surrounding the National Guard,
Yeah,
especially concerning the military's role in domestic security?
absolutely. The use of the military and civilian law enforcement is a complex issue with valid concerns about human rights and potential overreach. AMLO does touch upon this, specifically mentioning the case of Genaro Garcia Luna, a former security official convicted of corruption in the U.S.
Right.
However, it's a nuanced issue that deserves deeper examination than the speech provides.
It seems like a recurring theme in his address, right? Like acknowledging a complex issue, but then quickly pivoting to a more, I don't know, simplistic narrative of success. Does that feel accurate to you?
Yeah, it's a fair observation. While AMLO does acknowledge the ongoing challenges of violence in Mexico, he quickly points to statistics showing a reduction in homicide rates compared to the previous administration. He attributes this to what he calls stopping the support for criminal organizations that he claims was prevalent before his time.
So, playing the blame game a little, it's interesting how he seems to position his administration as like a clean break from the past. Almost like he's saying, don't blame me, I just got here.
Yeah. It's a strategic approach for sure. By framing the issues as inherited from his predecessors, he can present his own actions in a more favorable light, even when acknowledging those ongoing problems. It's classic setting the narrative in action.
And speaking of setting the narrative, let's talk about his claims about public perception.
Yeah.
He presents data suggesting high approval ratings, even comparing himself to Benito Juarez in terms of public trust. That's a pretty bold comparison, wouldn't you say?
It's certainly an ambitious parallel to draw.
Yeah.
Juarez is a revered figure in Mexican history, known for his resistance to French occupation and his role in establishing a democratic republic.
Right.
AMLO seems to be aiming for a similar place in the national consciousness, aligning himself with these deeply respected figures.
But is that public adoration reflected in reality? I mean, his approval ratings, while generally positive, haven't been without their ups and downs.
Right.
What do you make of that apparent disconnect?
That's a crucial point. While AMLO enjoys substantial support, it's not universal, right?
Okay.
And his approval has fluctuated throughout his term.
Right.
This suggests that the rosy picture he paints in his address might not tell the whole story.
Right.
It highlights the importance of looking beyond any single source, especially, a self-congratulatory farewell speech, to gain a more nuanced understanding of public sentiment.
So a bit of a reality check is needed alongside the victory lap.
Right.
And speaking of things that might need a reality check, let's shift gears to another area. AMLO seems eager to highlight his austere approach to governance. He makes a big deal about cutting back on government spending, even comparing his frugality to that of, wait for it, St. Francis of Assisi.
It's definitely one of the more memorable moments in the address. And while the comparison to a saint might seem, out of left field,
Yeah.
it speaks to AMLO's desire to project an image of humility and service.
Humility and service with a side of tortilla economics, right?
Right.
It's fascinating how he ties this idea of austerity back to his social programs. He's basically saying, look, I tightened our belts so we could put more money in your pockets.
Exactly. He's constructing a narrative that links his personal commitment to, a frugal lifestyle with tangible benefits for the Mexican people. It's a powerful message, and one that likely resonates with his base.
But is it a message that holds up to scrutiny?
Right.
His critics argue that these austerity measures have sometimes come at the expense of, essential services, leading to cuts in healthcare, education, things like that.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile those criticisms with the positive spin he puts on it?
That's where a deep dive like this becomes so valuable.
Okay.
It's not just about accepting AMLO's version of events at face value. It's about examining the potential downsides, the unintended consequences of his policies.
Right.
Did these austerity measures achieve their intended goals without causing harm in other areas? That's a question worth exploring further.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each piece of the speech, each claim, each anecdote is a piece of the puzzle. And it's only when we put all those pieces together that we can start to see the bigger picture.
And just when you thought you had all the pieces, AMLO throws in a curveball, ending his farewell address not with a rousing call to action, but with a raffle.
Okay, you've got to admit, that was a weird one, right? Like, it's like going to a Shakespearean tragedy and having the actors break out into like a polka number at the end.
Unconventional, to say the least.
Yeah,
But remember, this is AMLO, a master of using, unorthodox methods to connect with the public.
right.
This raffle, however bizarre it might seem, is just another example of that.
It's like he's saying, okay, enough about my legacy. Who wants a free car?
Right.
What do you think he's hoping to achieve with this rather unexpected finale?
It's a brilliant, if perplexing, move. By ending with something so unexpected, so undeniably AMLO, he ensures that his farewell address is memorable, that it sparks conversation.
And sparks conversation, it certainly has. But beyond the spectacle of the raffle, what does this final act tell us about, I don't know, his approach to leadership, his relationship with the Mexican people?
It underscores his populist style, his desire to be seen as a man of the people, even in the most unconventional ways.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that AMLO's legacy will be as much about his style, his ability to, connect directly with citizens, as it will be about his specific policies.
So a leader who understands the power of a good spectacle, even amidst a serious speech about his legacy. But spectacle aside, what about the substance? As we kind of start to wrap up our deep dive, what are your final thoughts on AMLO's attempt to shape his legacy through this farewell address?
It's a carefully constructed narrative, right? Highlighting what he sees as his most significant accomplishments. Reducing poverty, tackling corruption, improving security. But as we've discussed, there are often different perspectives, different interpretations of the data, and potential downsides to consider.
So a mixed bag, perhaps?
Yeah.
Plenty of achievements to celebrate, but also areas where his record is more complicated, more open to debate.
Precisely. And that, dear listener, is the beauty of a depth dive like this.
Yeah.
It's not about, blindly accepting one side or the other. It's about engaging with the complexities, with the nuances, and forming your own conclusions.
It reminds me of something we often say on this show. There's always more to the story.
Right.
And in this case, the story of AMLO's presidency and its impact on Mexico is still being written.
Absolutely. This farewell address, however meticulously crafted, is just one chapter in a much larger narrative. It's a snapshot in time.
Right.
A moment of transition as power shifts from one leader to another.
And speaking of transition, we can't forget about Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, waiting in the wings to become Mexico's first female president.
Right.
How do you think her upcoming term factors into this discussion of AMLO's legacy?
It's an essential piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Sheinbaum Pardo is both inheritor and architect, right?
Okay.
She'll inherit the successes and challenges of AMLO's policies,
Right.
but she'll also have the opportunity to build upon them, to reshape them according to her own vision.
So she's stepping into some pretty big shoes,
Yeah,
but with the chance to, put her own stamp on things.
for sure.
What aspects of AMLO's agenda do you think she'll kind of embrace? And where might she diverge?
It's likely she'll continue many of his social welfare programs.
Okay.
These have been incredibly popular and are seen as, central to his fourth transformation.
Right.
However, she might face pressure to address concerns about their long-term sustainability,
Okay.
especially given the economic realities Mexico faces.
Right. Those tortillas don't pay for themselves.
Right, exactly.
And what about those, more controversial aspects of his tenure, like the increased reliance on the military for security?
Right.
Will that be a point of continuity
Right.
or a point of departure?
That's one of the big questions surrounding her presidency.
Okay.
She's publicly expressed support for the National Guard, but also acknowledged the need for, better training and oversight to address human rights concerns. Her approach to this issue will be a crucial indicator of, her leadership style, her priorities.
So lots of potential paths forward.
Yeah.
Lots of challenges to navigate.
For sure.
As we wrap up our deep dive into AMLO's farewell, is there one key takeaway, one overarching thought you'd leave our listener with today?
I think the most important thing to remember is that leadership is a conversation,
Okay.
not a monologue.
Right.
AMLO has delivered his final address, his attempt to shape his legacy. But now it's up to the Mexican people and their new president to write the next chapter.
To determine whether this farewell is the end of a story or just the beginning of a new one. As always, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking out those different perspectives.